by C.J. Cherryh. Originally published in a 1985 anthology edited by Janet Morris called Afterwar, it appeared in two more anthologies the next year, the 1986 annual World's Best SF and World's Best SF5. Then, in 1987, it appeared in the first collection of the author's stories entitled Glass and Amber. It can also be found in The Complete Short Fiction of C.J. Cherryh, published in 2005. Read by Darrell T. Smith II for my channel, Quasar Spectra. Pots. It was a most bitter trip, the shuttle descent to the windy surface. Suited, encumbered by life support, Desan stepped off the platform and waddled onward into the world, waving off the attentions of small, spidery surface robots. Citizen, this way, citizen, have a care, do watch your step, a suit tear is hazardous. Low-level servitors. Desan detested them. The chief of operations had plainly sent these creatures accompanied only by an AI 8-wheel transport, which inconveniently chose to park itself a good 500 paces beyond the shuttle blast zone, an uncomfortable long walk across the dusty pan in the crinkling, pack-encumbered oxy-suit. Desan turned, casting a forlorn glance at the shuttle waiting there on its landing gear, silver, dip-nosed wedge under a gunmetal sky, at rest on an ochre and rust landscape. He shivered in the sky view, surrendered himself and his meager luggage to the irritating ministries of the service robots, and waddled on his slow way down to the waiting AI transport. "Good day," the vehicle said, inanely opening a door. "My passenger compartment is not safe atmosphere. Do you understand, Lord Desan?" Yes. Desan climbed in and settled himself in the front seat, a slight give of the transport's suspensors. The robots fussed about in insectile hesitance, delicately setting his luggage case just so, adjusting till it conformed with their robotic, template-compared notion of their job. Maddening. Typical robotic efficiency. Desan slapped the pressure-sensitive seating. "Come, let's get this moving, shall we?" The AI talked to its duller cousins, a single squeal that sent them scuttling. "Attention to the door, citizen!" It lowered and locked. The AI started its noisy drive motor. "Will you want the windows dimmed, citizen?" "No, I want to see this place." "A pleasure, Lord Desan." Doubtless for the AI, it was. The station was situated a long drive across the pan, across increasingly softer dust that rolled up to obscure the rear view. Softer, looser dust, occasionally a wind-scooped hollow that made the transport flex. "Do forgive me, citizen. Are you comfortable?" Quite. You're very good." "Thank you, citizen." And finally, something other than flat appeared, the merest humps of hills, and one anomalous mountain, a massive long bar that began as a haze and became solid, became a smooth regularity before the gentle brown folding of hills hardly worthy of the name. Mountain. The eye, indeed, took it for a volcanic or sedimentary formation at distance, some anomalous and stubborn outcrop in this barren reach where all else had declined to entropy, absolute, featureless flat. But when the AI passed along its side, this mountain had joints and seams, had the marks of making on it, and even knowing in advance what it was, driving along within view of the jointing, this work of ancient hands chilled Desan's well-traveled soul. The station itself came into view against the weathered hills, a collection of shocking green domes on a brown, lifeless world. But such domes Desan had seen. With only the AI for witness, Desan turned in his seat, pressed the flexible bubble of the helmet to the double seal window, and stared at the stonework until it passed to the rear and the dust obscured it. "Here, Lord," said the AI, eternally cheerful. "We're almost at the station. A little climb. I do it very smoothly." Flex and lean, sway and turn. The domes lurched closer in the forward window, and the motor whined. "I've very much enjoyed serving you." "Thank you," Desan murmured, seeing another walk before him. Ascent of a plastic grid to an airlock and no sight of a welcoming committee. More service robots scuttling toward them as the transport stopped and adjusted itself with a pneumatic wheeze. "Thank you, Lord Desan. Do watch your helmet. Watch your life support connections. Watch your footing, please. The dust is slick. Thank you." With an AI, one had no recourse. "Thank you, my lord." The door came up. Desan extricated himself from the seat and stepped to the dusty ground, carefully shielding the oxypack from the door frame and panting with the unaccustomed weight of it in such gravity. The service robots moved to take his luggage while Desan waddled doggedly on up the plastic gridwork path to the glaringly lime-green domes. Plastics. Plastics which could not even originate in this desolation, but which came from their ship's spare biomass. Here all was dead, frighteningly void. Even the signal that guided him to the lakebed was robotic, like the advisement that a transport would meet him. The airlock door shot open ahead, and living suited personnel appeared, 3 of them, at long last, flesh and blood personnel came walking toward him to offer proper courtesy. But before that mountain of stone, before these glaring green structures and the robotic paraphernalia of research that made all the reports real, Desan still felt the deathliness of the place. He trudged ahead, touched the offered gloved hands, acknowledged the expected salutations, and proceeded up the jointed plastic walk to the open airlock. His marrow refused to be warmed. The place refused to come into clear focus, like some bad dream with familiar elements hideously distorted. 100 years of voyage since he had last seen this world, and then only from orbit, receiving reports third-hand. 100 years of work on this planet preceded this small trip from port to research center under that threatening sky, in this place by a mountain that had once been a dam on a lake that no longer existed. There had been the findings on the moon, of course, a few artifacts, a cloth of symbols, primitive, unthinkably primitive. First omen of the findings on this serene, rust-brown world. He accompanied the welcoming committee into the airlock of the main dome, waded through the cycle, and breathed a sigh of relief as the indicator lights went from white to orange, and the inner door admitted them to the interior. He walked forward, removed the helmet, and drew a deep breath of air unexpectedly and unpleasantly tainted. The foyer of this centermost dome was businesslike. Plastic walls, visible ducting. A few plants struggled for life in a planter in the center of the floor. Before it, a black pillar and a common enough emblem, a plaque with 2 naked alien figures, the diagrams of a star system, reproduced even to its scars and pitting. In some places it might be mundane, unnoticed. It belonged here, and it could never be mundane, this message of the ancients. "Lord Desan?" a female voice said, and he turned, awkward in the suit. It was Dr. Gothan herself, unmistakable aged woman in science blues. The rare honor dazed him and wiped away all failure of hospitality thus far. She held out her hand. Startled, he reacted in kind, remembered the glove, and hastily drew back his hand to strip the glove. Her gesture was gracious, and he felt the very fool and very much off his stride, his hands touching, no, firmly grasped by the calloused, aged hand of this legendary intellect. Age-soft and hard-surfaced at once. Age and vigor. His tongue quite failed him, and he felt, recalling his purpose, utterly daunted. "Come in. Let them rid you of that suit, Lord Desan. Will you rest after your trip? A nap? A cup of tea, perhaps? The robots are taking your luggage to your room. Accommodations here aren't luxurious, but I think you'll find them comfortable." Deeper and deeper into courtesies. One could lose all sense of direction in such surroundings, letting oneself be disarmed by gentleness, by pleasantness, by embarrassed reluctance to resist. "I want to see what I came to see, Doctor." Desan unfastened more seams and shed the suit into waiting hands, smoothed the coveralls. Was that too brusque, too unforgivably hasty? "I don't think I could rest, Dr. Gothan. I attended my comfort aboard the shuttle. I'd like to get my bearings here at least. If one of your staff would be so kind to take me in hand." Of course, of course. I rather expected as much. Do come, please. Let me show you about. I'll explain as much as I can. Perhaps I can convince you as I go." He was overwhelmed from the start. He had expected some high official, the director of operations most likely, not Gothan. He walked slightly after the doctor, the stoop-shouldered presence which passed like a benison among the students and lesser staff. "I saw the doctor," the young ones had been wont to say in hushed tones aboard the ship, when Gothan strayed absently down a corridor in her rare intervals of walking. "I saw the doctor." In that voice one might claim a theophany. They had rarely waked her, lesser researchers being sufficient for most worlds, while he was the fifth Lord Navigator, the fourth born on the journey, a time-dilated trifle, 52 waking years of age in a mere 2,000 years of voyage against eons of Gothan's slumberous life. And Desan's marrow ached now at such gentle grace in this bowed, mottle-skinned old scholar, this sleuth patiently deciphering the greatest mystery of the universe. Pity occurred to him. He suffered personally in this place, but not as Gothan would have suffered here, in that inward quiet where Gothan carried on thoughts the ship crews were sternly admonished never to disturb. Students rushed now to open doors for them, pressed themselves to the walls, and allowed their passage into deeper halls within the maze of the domes. Passing hands brushed Desan's sleeves. Welcome, offered the current Lord Navigator. He reciprocated with as much of attention as he could devote to courtesy in his distress. His heart labored in the unaccustomed gravity. His nostrils accepted not only the effluvium of dome plastics and the recyclers and so many bodies dwelling together, but a flinty, bitter air, like electricity or dry dust. He imagined some hazardous leakage of the atmosphere into the dome. Unsettling thought. The hazards of the place came home to him, and he wished already to be away. Gothan had endured here. During his further voyages, 7 years more of her diminishing life, waked 4 times, and this was the 4th, continually active now for 5 years, her longest stint yet in any waking. She had found data finally worth the consumption of her life, and she burned it without stint. She believed enough to die pursuing it. He shuddered up and down and followed Gothan through a sealed door toward yet another dome, and his gut tightened in dismay, for there were shelves on either hand, and those shelves were lined with yellowed skulls, endless rows of staring dark sockets and grinning jaws. Some were long-nosed, some were short, some small, virtually noseless skulls had fangs, which gave them a wise and intelligent look, like miniature people, like babies with grown-up features. Must be the initial reaction of anyone seeing them in the hollows or viewing the specimens brought up to the orbiting labs. But cranial capacity in these was much too small. The real sapient occupied further shelves, row upon row of eyeless, generously domed skulls, grinning in their flat-toothed way in permanent horror, provoking profoundest horror in those that discovered them here, in this desolation. Here, Gothan paused, selected one of the small sapient skulls, much reconstructed. Desan had at least the skill to recognize the true bone from the plasbone bonded to it. This skull was far more delicate than the others, the jaw smaller. The front two teeth were restructs. So was one of the side. "It was a child," Gothan said. "We call her Missy. The first we found at this site, up in the hills, in a stream bank. Most of Missy's feet were gone, but she's otherwise intact. Missy was all alone except for a little animal all tucked up in her arms. We keep them together. Never mind the cataloging." She lifted an anomalous and much reconstructed skull from the shelf among the sapients, fanged and delicate. Even archaeologists have sentiment. "I see." Helpless, caught in courtesy, Desan extended an unwilling finger and touched the child's skull. "Back to sleep." Gothan set both skulls tenderly back on the shelf and dusted her hands and walked further, Desan following, beyond a simple door and into a busy room of workbenches piled high with a clutter of artifacts. Staff began to rise from their dusty work in a sudden startlement. No, go on," Gothan said quietly. "We're only passing through. Ignore us. Here, do you see, Lord Desan?" Gothan reached carefully past a researcher's shoulder and lifted from the counter an elongate ribbed bottle with the opalescent patina of long burial. "We find a great many of these. Mass production. Industry. Not only on this continent. This same bottle exists in sites all over the world, in the uppermost strata. Same design. Near the time of the calamity, we trace global alliances and trade by such small things." She set it down and gathered up a virtually complete vase, much patched. "It always comes to pots, Lord Desan. By pots and bottles we track them through the ages. Many layers. They had a long and complex past." Desan reached out and touched the corroded brown surface of the vase, discovering a single bright remnant of blue glaze along with the gray incrustations of long burial. How long does it take to reduce a thing to this?" "It depends on the soil, on moisture, on acidity. This came from hereabouts." Gothan tenderly set it back on a shelf, walked on, frail, hunch-shouldered figure among the aisles of the past. "But very long to obliterate so much. Almost all the artifacts are gone. Metals oxidize, plastics rot, cloth goes very quickly, paper and wood last quite long in a desert climate, but they go, finally. Moisture dissolves the details of sculpture. Only the noble metals survive intact. Soil creep warps even stone, crushes metal. We find even the best pots in a matrix of pieces, a puzzle toss. Fragile as they are, they outlast monuments. They last as long as the earth that holds them, drylands, wetlands, even beneath the sea, where no marine life exists to trouble them. That bottle and that pot are as venerable as that great dam. The makers wouldn't have thought that, would they? But Desan's mind reeled at the remembrance of the great plain, the silt and the deep-buried secrets. But, well, you surely might miss important detail. A world to search. You might walk right over something and misinterpret everything. Oh, yes, it can happen, but finding things where we expect them is an important clue, Lord Desan. A confirmation. One only has to suspect where to look. We locate our best hope first. A sunken, a raised place in those photographs we trouble the orbiters to take, but one gets a feeling about the lay of the land, more than the mechanical probes, Lord Desan. Gothan's dark eyes crinkled in the passage of thoughts unguessed, and Desan stood lost in Gothan's unthinkable mentality. What did a mind do in such age? Wander? Could the great doctor lapse into mysticism? To report such a thing would solve one difficulty, but to have that regrettable duty, it's a feeling for living creatures, Lord Desan. It's reaching out to the land and saying, if this were long ago, if I thought to build, if I thought to trade, where would I go? Where would my neighbors live? Desan coughed delicately, wishing to draw things back to hard fact. And the robot probes, of course, do assist. Probes, Lord Desan, are heartless things. A robot can be very skilled, but a researcher directs it only at distance, blind to opportunities and the true sense of the land. But you were born to space. Perhaps it makes no sense. I take your word for it, Desan said earnestly. He felt the weight of the sky on his back, the leaden, awful sky, leprous and unhealthy cover between them, and the star and the single moon. Gothan remembered Homeworld. Remembered Homeworld. Had been renowned in her field even there. The old scientist claimed to come to such a landscape and locate things by seeing things that robot eyes could not, by thinking thoughts those dusty skulls had held in fleshly matter. How long ago? We looked for mounds, Gothan said, continuing in her brittle gait down the aisle, past the bowed heads and shy looks of staff and students at their meticulous tasks. The work of tiny electronic needles proceeded about them, the patient ticking away at encrustations to bring ancient surfaces to light. They built massive structures, great skyscrapers. Some of them must have lasted, thousands of years intact, but when they went unstable, they fell, and their fall made rubble, and the wind came and the rivers shifted their courses around the ruin, and of course the weight of sediment piled up, wind and water driven. From that point, its own weight moved it and warped it and complicated our work. Gothan paused again beside a further table where hollow plates stood inactive. She waved her hand and a landscape showed itself, a serpentined row of masonry across a depression. See the wall there? They didn't build it that way, all wavering back and forth and up and down. Gravity and soil movement deformed it. It was buried till we unearthed it. Otherwise, wind and rain alone would have destroyed it ages ago, as it will do now if time doesn't rebury it. And this great pile of stone, Desan waved an arm, indicating the imagined direction of the great dam and realizing himself disoriented. How old is it? Old as the lake it made. But contemporaneous with the fall. Yes. Do you know that mass may be standing when the star dies? The few great dams, the pyramids we find here and there around the world, one only guesses at their age. They'll outlast any other surface feature except the mountains themselves. Without life. Oh, but there is. Declining. No, not declining. The doctor waved her hand, and a puddle appeared over the second hollow plate. all green with weed waving feathery tendrils back and forth in the surge. The moon still keeps this world from entropy. There's water, not as much as this dam saw. It's the weed, this little weed, that gives one hope for this world. The little life, the things that fly and crawl, the lichens and the life on the flatlands. But nothing they knew. No, life's evolved new answers here. Life's starting over. It certainly hasn't much to start with, has it? Not very much. It's a question that interests Dr. Bathogi, whether the life making a start here has the time left, and whether the consumption curve doesn't add up to defeat. But life doesn't know that. We're very concerned about contamination, but we fear it's inevitable. And who knows, perhaps it will have added something beneficial. Dr. Gothan lit yet another hollow with a wave of her hand. A streamlined, six-legged creature scuttled energetically across a surface of dead moss, frantically waving antennae and making no apparent progress. The inheritors of the world. Despair chilled Desan's marrow. But each generation of these little creatures is an unqualified success. The last to perish perishes in profound tragedy, of course, but without consciousness of it. The awareness will have, 500 million years to wait. Then maybe it will reappear. If the star doesn't fail, it's already far advanced down the sequence. Another hollow, the image of desert, of blowing sand, beside the hollow of the surge of weed in a pool. Life makes life. That weed you see is busy making life. It's taking in and converting and building a chain of support that will enable things to feed on it, while more of its kind grows. That's what life does. It's busy, all unintended, of course, but fortuitously building itself a way off the planet. Desan cast her an uncomfortable look askance. Oh, indeed, biomass, petrochemicals, the storehouse of eons of energy, all waiting the use of consciousness. And that consciousness, if it arrives, dominates the world, because awareness is a way of making life more efficiently. But consciousness is a perilous thing, Lord Desan. Consciousness is a computer loose with its own perceptions and performing calculations on its own course in the service of that little weed. Billions of such computers, all running and calculating faster and faster, adjusting themselves in their ecological environment. And what if there were the smallest, the most insignificant software error at the outset? Well, you don't believe such a thing. You don't reduce us to that. Desan's faith was shaken. This good woman had not gone unstable. This great intellect had had her faith shaken. That was what the great and gentle doctor had, in her unthinkable age, acquired cynicism, and he fought back with his 52 meager years. Surely, but surely this isn't the proof, Doctor. This could have been a natural calamity. Oh yes, the meteor strike. The doctor waved past a series of hollows on a fourth plate, and a vast crater showed in aerial view, a crater so vast the picture showed planetary curvature. It was one of the planet's main features, shockingly visible from space. But this solar system shows scar after scar of such events. A many-planeted system like this, a star well attended by debris in its course through the galaxy. Look at the airless bodies, the moons. Consider the number of meteor strikes that crater them. Tell me, spacefarer, am I not right in that? Desan drew in a breath, relieved to be questioned in his own element. Well, of course, the system is prone to that kind of accident, but that crater is ample cause, if it came when there was still sapience here. But that hammer blow fell on a dead world. He gazed on the eroded crater, the sand-swept crustal melting, eloquent of age. You have proof. Strata. Pots. Ironic. They must have feared such an event very greatly. One thinks they must have had a sense of doom about them, perhaps on the evidence of their moon, or understanding the mechanics of their solar system, or perhaps primitive times witnessed such falls, and they remembered. One catches a glimpse of the mind that reached out from here. What impelled it? What it sought? How can we know that? We overlay our mind on their expectations. Desan silenced himself, abashed, terrified. It was next to heresy. In a moment more he would have committed irremediable indiscretion, and the Lord's magistrate on the orbiting station would hear it by supper time to his eternal detriment. We stand in their landscape, handle their bones. We hold their skulls in our fleshly hands and try to think in their world. Here we stand beneath a threatening heaven. What will we do? Try to escape. Try to get off this world. They did get off. The celestial artifacts. Archaeology is ever so much easier in space. 1,000,000 years, 2, and a thing still shines. Records still can be read. A color can blaze out undimmed after aeons when first a light falls on it. One surface chewed away by microdust, and the opposing face pristine as the day it had its maker's hand on it. You keep asking me about the age of these ruins, but we know that. Don't we truly suspect it in the marrow of our bones? At what age they fell silent? It can't have happened then. Come with me, Lord Desan. Gothan waved a hand, extinguishing all the hollows, and, walking on, opened the door into yet another hallway. So much to catalog. That's much of the work in that room. They're students, mostly, restoring what they can, numbering, listing. A librarian's job, just to know where things are filed. In 500 years more of intensive cataloging and restoring, we may know them well enough to know something of their minds, though we may never find more of their written language than those artifacts on the moon. A place of wonders, a place of ongoing wonders in Dr. Botogi's work. A little algae beginning to work all over again, perhaps not for the first time. Interesting thought. You mean... Desan overtook the aged doctor in the narrow, sterile hall, a series of ringing steps. You mean before the sapients evolved, there were other calamities, other re-beginnings? Oh, well before. It sends chills up one's back, doesn't it? To think how incredibly stubborn life might be here, how persistent in the calamity of the skies, the algae and then the creeping things, and the slow climb to dominance. Previous sapience? Interesting question in itself. But a thing need not be sapient to dominate a world, Lord Desan. Only tough. Only efficient. Haven't the worlds proven that? High sapience is a rare jewel. So many successes are dead ends. Flippers and not hands, lack of vocal apparatus. Unless you believe in telepathy, which I assuredly don't. No, vocalizing is necessary. Some sort of long-distance communication. Light flashes, sound, something. Else your individuals stray apart in solitary discovery and rediscovery and duplication of effort. Oh, even with awareness, even granted that rare attribute, how many species lack something essential or have some handicap that will stop them before civilization, before technology, before they leave the planet? But they did that. They were the 1 in 1,000. Without them, yes. Gothan turned her wonderful soft eyes on him at close range, and for a moment he felt a great and terrible stillness, like the stillness of a grave. Childhood ends here. One way or another, it ends. He was struck speechless. He stood there, paralyzed a moment, his mind tumbling freefall, then blinked and followed the doctor like a child, helpless to do otherwise. "Let me rest," he thought then. "Let us forget this beginning and this day. Let me go somewhere and sit down and have a warm drink to get the chill from my marrow, and let us begin again. Perhaps we can begin with facts and not fancies." But he would not rest. He feared that there was no rest to be had in this place, that once the body stopped moving, the weight of the sky would come down, the deadly sky that had boded destruction for all the history of this lost species, and the age of the land would seep into his bones and haunt his dreams as the far greater scale of stars did not. "All the years I've voyaged, Dr. Gotham, all the years of my life searching from star to star, relativity has made orphans of us. The world will have sainted you. Me it never knew. In 250,000 years, they'll have forgotten. Oh, Doctor, you know more than I how a world ages. 250,000 years you've seen, and we're both orphans. Me endlessly cloned, you in your long sleep. Your several clones held eons waiting in theirs. Oh, Doctor, we'll recreate you, and not truly you, ever again. No more than I'm Desan Prime. I'm only the 5th Lord Navigator. In 250,000 years, has not our species evolved beyond us? Might they not? May they not find some faster transport and find us, their aeons lost precursors? And we will not know each other. Dr. Gotham, how could we know each other? If they had, but they have not. We've become the wave front of a quest that never overtakes us, never surpasses us. In 250,000 years, might some calamity have befallen us and our world be like this world? Ochre and deadly rust? While we are clones and children of clones, genetic fossils, anomalies of our kind, what are they to us and we to them? We seek the ancients, the makers of the probe. Desan's mind reeled. Adept as he was at time relativity calculations, accustomed as he was to stellar immensities, his mind tottered, and he fought to regain the corridor in which they walked, he and the doctor. He widened his stride yet again, overtaking Gotham at the next door. "Doctor," he put out his hand, preventing her, and then feared his own question, his own skirting of heresy and tempting of hers. "Are you beyond doubt? You can't be beyond doubt. They could have simply abandoned this world and its calamity." Again, the impact of those gentle eyes, devastating. Tell me, Lord Desan, in all your travels, in all the several near stars you visited in a century of effort, have you found traces?" "No, but they could have gone, leaving no traces except on their moon?" "There may be others. The team in search on the 4th planet finds nothing." "You yourself say that you have to stand in that landscape. You have to think with their mind. Maybe Dr. Ashot hasn't come to the right hill, the right plane. If there are artifacts there, there are only a few. I'll tell you why I know so. Come with me." Gotham waved a hand, and the door gaped on yet another laboratory. Desan walked. He had rather have walked out to the deadly surface than through this simple door to the answer Gotham promised him. But habit impelled him. Habit, duty, necessity. He had no other purpose for his life but this. He had been left none. Lord Navigator, 5th incarnation of Desan Das. They had launched his original with none. His 2nd incarnation had had less. and time and successive incarnations had ripped everything else away. So he went into a place at once too mundane and too strange to be quite sane. Mundane because it was sterile as any lab, a well-lit place of littered tables and a few researchers, and strange because hundreds and hundreds of skulls and bones were piled on shelves in heaps on one wall, silent witnesses. An articulated skeleton hung in its frame, the skeleton of a small animal scampered in macabre rigidity on a tabletop. He stopped. He stared about him, lost for the moment in the stare of all those eyeless sockets of weathered bone. "Let me present my colleagues," Gothon was saying. Desan focused on the words late and blinked helplessly as Gothon rattled off names. Botogi the zoologist was one, younger than most, 17th incarnation, burning himself out in profligate use of his years. So with all the incarnations of Botogi Nan, the rest of the names slid past his ears ungathered. True strangers, the truly born, sons and daughters of the voyage. He was lost in their stares like the stares of the skulls, eyes behind which shadows and dust were truth, gazes full of secrets and heresies. They knew him, and he did not know them, not even Lord Botogi. He felt his solitude, the helplessness of his convictions, all lost in the dust and the silences. "Kagote," said Gothon to a white-eared, hunched individual. "Kagote, the Lord Desan has come to see your model." "Ah." The aged eyes flicked nervously. "Show him, pray, Dr. Kagote." The hunched man walked over to the table, spread his hands. A hollow flared, and Desan blinked, having expected some dreadful image, some confrontation with a reconstruction. Instead, columns of words rippled in the air, green and blue. Numbers ticked and multiplied. In his startlement, he lost the beginning and failed to follow them. "I don't see—" "We speak statistics here," Gothon said. "We speak data. We couch our heresies in mathematical formulae." Desan turned and stared at Gothon in fright. "Heresies I have nothing to do with, Doctor. I deal with facts. I come here to find facts." "Sit down," the gentle doctor said. "Sit down, Lord Desan. There, move the bones over. Do. The owners won't mind. There, that's right." Desan collapsed onto a stool facing a white work table, looked up reflexively, eye drawn by a wall-mounted stone that bore the blurred image of a face, eroded, time-dulled. The juxtaposition of image and bones overwhelmed him. The two whole bodies portrayed on the plaque, the sculpture, the rows of fleshless skulls. Dead. World hammered by meteors. Life struggling in its most rudimentary forms. Dead. "Ah," Gothon said. Desan looked around and saw Gothon looking up at the wall in her turn. "Yes, that. Occasionally the fall of stone will protect a surface. Confirmation, indeed. But the skulls tell us as much. With our measurements and our hollows, we can flesh them. We can make them even more vivid. Do you want to see?" Desan's mouth worked. "No." A small word. A coward word. "Later. So this was one place? You still don't convince me of your thesis, Doctor. I'm sorry." "The place. The world of origin. A many-layered world. The last layers are rich with artifacts of one period, one global culture. Then silence. Species extinguished. Stratum upon stratum of desolation. Millions of years of geological record Gothun came round the end of the table and sat down in the opposing chair, elbows on the table, a scatter of bone between them. Gothun's green eyes shone watery in the brilliant light. Her mouth was wrinkled about the jowls and trembled in minute cracks, like aged clay. The statistics, Lord Desan, the dry statistics tell us. They tell us the centers of production of artifacts, such as we have. They tell us compositions, processes the ancients knew, and there was no progression into advanced materials. None of the materials we take for granted. Metals that would have lasted, and perhaps they went to some new process. Materials that degraded completely. Perhaps their information storage was on increasingly perishable materials. Perhaps they developed these materials in space. And technology has steps. The dry numbers, the dusty dry numbers, the incidences and concentration of items, the numbers and the pots, always the pots, Lord Desan, and the imperishable stones, and the very fact of the meteors, the undeniable fact of the meteor strikes. Could we not avert such a calamity for our own world? Could we not have done it, half a century before we left? I'm sure you remember, Dr. Gothun. I'm sure you have the advantage of me, but, well, you see the evidence. You want to cling to your hopes. But there is only one question. No, two. Is this the species that launched the probe? Yes. Or evolution and coincidence have cooperated mightily. Is this the only world they inhabited? Beyond all doubt. If there are artifacts on the fourth planet, they are scoured by its storms, buried, lost. But they may be there. There is no abundance of them. There is no progression, Lord Desan. That is the key thing. There is nothing beyond these substances, these materials. This was not a starfaring civilization. They launched their slow, unmanned probes with their cameras, their robot eyes. Not for us. We always knew that. We were the recipients of flotsam, mere wreckage on the beach. It was purposeful, Desan hissed, trembling, surrounded by them all, a lone credent among this quiet heresy in this room. Dr. Gothun, your unique position is a position of trust, of profound trust. I beg you to consider the effect you have. Do you threaten me, Lord Desan? Are you here for that, to silence me? Desan looked desperately about him, at the sudden hush in the room. The minute tickings of probes and picks had stopped. Eyes stared. Please. He looked back. I came here to gather data. I expected a simple meeting, a few staff meetings, to consider things at leisure. I have distressed you. You wonder how it would be if the Lord's Magistrate fell at odds with me. I am aware of myself as an institution, Lord Desan. I remember Desan Das. I remember Launch, the original 5 ships. I have waked to all but one of your incarnations, not to mention the numerous incarnations of the Lord's Magistrate. You cannot discount them. Even you. Let me plead with you, Dr. Gothun. Be patient with us. You do not need to teach me patience, Desan 5. He shivered convulsively. Even when Gothun smiled that gentle, disarming smile. You have to give me facts, Doctor, not mystical communings with the landscape. The Lord's Magistrate accept that this is the world of origin. I assure you that they never would have devoted so much time to creating a base here if that were not the case. Come, Lord, those power systems on the probe, so long dead, what was it truly for but to probe something very close at hand? Even orthodoxy admits that. And what is close at hand but their own solar system? Come, I've seen the original artifact and the original tablet, touched it with my own hands. This was a primitive venture, designed to cross their own solar system, which they had not the capability to do. Desan blinked. But the purpose, the purpose. You say that you stand in a landscape and you think in their mind. Well, Doctor, use this skill you claim. What did the ancients intend? Why did they send it out with a message? The old eyes flickered, deep and calm and pained. An oracular message, Lord Desan. A message into the dark of their own future, unaimed, unfocused, without answer, without hope of answer. We know its voyage time, 5 million years. They spoke to the universe at large. This probe went out, and they fell silent shortly afterward. The depth of this dry lake of dust, Lord Desan, is 8.25 million years. I will not believe that. 8.25 million years ago, Lord Desan, calamity fell on them, calamity global and complete within a century, perhaps within a decade of the launch of that probe. Perhaps calamity fell from the skies, but demonstrably it was atomics and their own doing. They were at that precarious stage, and the destruction in the great centers is catastrophic and of one level. Destruction centered in places of heavy population. That is what those statistics say. Atomics, Lord Desan. I cannot accept this. Tell me, spacefarer, do you understand the workings of weather? What those meteor strikes could do, the dust raised by atomics could do with equal efficiency. Never mind the radiation that alone would have killed millions. Never mind the destruction of centers of government. We speak of global calamity, the dimming of the sun in dust, the living oceans and lakes choking and dying photosynthetes in a sunless winter, killing the food chain from the bottom up. You have no proof. The universality, the ruin of the population centers. Arguably, they had the capacity to prevent meteor impact. That may be a matter of debate, but beyond a doubt in my own mind, simultaneous destruction of the population centers indicates atomics. The statistics, the pots, and the dry numbers, Lord Desan, doom us to that answer. The question is answered. There were no descendants. There was no escape from the world. They destroyed themselves before that meteor hit them. Desan rested his mouth against his joined hands, staring helplessly at the doctor. A lie. Is that what you're saying? We pursued a lie? Is it their fault that we needed them so much? Desan pushed himself to his feet and stood there by mortal effort. Gotham sat staring up at him with those terrible dark eyes. What will you do, Lord Navigator? Silence me? The old woman's grown difficult at last. Wake my clone after. Tell it what the Lord's magistrates select for it to be told? Gotham waved a hand about the room, indicating the staff, the dozen sets of living eyes among the dead. Bathogi, too, those of us who have clones. But what of the rest of the staff? How much will it take to silence all of us? Desan stared about him, trembling. Dr. Gotham. He leaned his hands on the table to look at her. You mistake me. You utterly mistake me. The Lord's magistrate may have the station, but I have the ships. I and my staff. I propose no such thing. I've come home. The unaccustomed word caught in his throat. He considered it, weighed it, accepted it, at least in the emotional sense. Home, Dr. Gotham. After 100 years of search to discover this argument and this dissension. Charges of heresy, they dare not make them against you. A bitter laugh welled up. Against you they have no argument, and you well know it, Dr. Gotham. Against their violence, Lord Navigator, I have no defense. But she has, said Dr. Bathogi. Desan turned, flicked a glance from the hardness in Bathogi's green eyes to the even harder substance of the stone in Bathogi's hand. He flung himself about again, hands on the table, abandoning the defense of his back. Dr. Gothan, I appeal to you. I'm your friend. For myself, said Dr. Gothan, I would make no defense at all, but as you say, they have no argument against me, so it must be a general catastrophe. The Lords Magistrate have to silence everyone, don't they? Nothing can be left of this base. Perhaps they've quietly dislodged an asteroid or two and put them on course. In the guise of mining, perhaps they will silence this poor old world forever, myself and the rest of the relics. Lost relics and the distant dead are always safer to venerate, aren't they? That's absurd. Or perhaps they've become more hasty now that your ships are here and their judgment is in question. They have atomics within their capability, Lord Navigator. They can disable your shuttle with beam fire. They can simply welcome you to the list of casualties, a charge of heresy, a thing taken out of context. Who knows? After all lords are immediately duplicatable. The captain's accustomed to obey the Lord's Magistrate, what few of them are awake. Am I not right? If an institution like myself can be threatened, where is the fifth Lord Navigator in their plans? And of a sudden, those plans will be moving in haste. Desan blinked. Dr. Gothan, I assure you, if you are my friend, Lord Navigator, I hope for your survival. The robots are theirs, do you understand? Their power packs are sufficient for transmission of information to the base AIs, and from the communications center it goes to satellites, and from satellites to the station and the Lord's Magistrate. This room is safe from their monitoring. We have seen to that. They cannot hear you. I cannot believe these charges. I cannot accept it. Is murder so new? Well, then come with me. Come with me to the shuttle. We'll confront them. The transportation to the port is theirs. It would not permit. The transport AI would resist. The planes have AI components, and we might never reach the airfield. My luggage, Dr. Gothan. My luggage. My comm unit. And Desan's heart sank, remembering the service robots. They have it. Gothan smiled, a small, amused smile. Oh, spacefarer, so many scientists clustered here, and could we not improvise so simple a thing? We have a receiver transmitter. Here, in this room, we broke one. We broke another. They're on the registry as broken. What's another bit of rubbish on this poor planet? We meant to contact the ships, to call you, Lord Navigator, when you came back. But you saved us the trouble. You came down to us like a thunderbolt, like the birds you never saw, my spaceborne lord, swooping down on prey. The conferences, the haste you must have inspired up there on the station. If the Lord's Magistrate planned what I most suspect, I congratulate you. But knowing we have a transmitter with your shuttle sitting on this world vulnerable as this building, what will you do, Lord Navigator, since they control the satellite relay? Desan sank down on his chair, stared at Gothan. You never meant to kill me. All this, you schemed to enlist me. I entertained that hope, yes. I knew your predecessors. I also know your personal reputation. A man who burns his years one after the other as if there were no end of them. Unlike his predecessors. What are you, Lord Navigator? Zealot? A man with an obsession? Where do you stand in this? To what? His voice came hoarse and strange. To what are you trying to convert me, Dr. Gothan? To our rescue from the Lord's magistrate, to the rescue of truth. Truth! Desan waved a desperate gesture. I don't believe you. I cannot believe you, and you tell me about plots as fantastical as your research and try to involve me in your politics. I'm trying to find the trail the ancients took, one clue, one artifact to direct us. A new tablet? You make light of me. Anything, any indication where they went. And they did go, Doctor. You will not convince me with your statistics. The unforeseen and the unpredicted aren't in your statistics. So you'll go on looking for what you'll never find. You'll serve the Lord's magistrate. They'll surely cooperate with you. They'll approve your search and leave this world after the great catastrophe. After the catastrophe that obliterates us and all the records. An asteroid. Who but the robots chart their courses? Who knows how close it is at this moment? People would know a murder. They could never hide it. I tell you, Lord Desan, you stand in a place and you look around you and you say, what would be natural to this place? In this cratered, devastated world, in this chaotic, debris-ridden solar system, could not an input error by an asteroid miner be more credible an accident than atomics? I tell you, when your shuttle descended, we thought you might be acting for the Lord's magistrate, that you might have a weapon in your baggage which their robots would deliberately fail to detect. But I believe you, Lord Navigator. You're as trapped as we, with only the transmitter and a satellite relay system they control. What will you do? Persuade the Lord's magistrate that you support them? Persuade them to support you this further voyage in return for your backing them? Perhaps they'll listen to you and let you leave. But they will, Desan said. He drew in a deep breath and looked from Gothan to the others and back again. My shuttle is my own, my robotics, Dr. Gothan, from my ship and linked to it, and what I need is that transmitter. Appeal to me for protection if you think it is so urgent. Trust me, or trust nothing, and we will all wait here and see what truth is. Gothan reached into a pocket, held up an odd metal object, smiled. Her eyes crinkled round the edges. An old-fashioned thing, Lord Navigator. We say key nowadays and means something quite different. But I'm a relic myself, remember? Baffles the hell out of the robots. But Thogi, link up that antenna and unlock the closet and let's see what the Lord Navigator and his shuttle can do. Did it hear you? Bathogi asked, a boy's honest worry on his unlined face. He still had the rock, as if he had forgotten it, or feared robots, or intended to use it if he detected treachery. Is it moving? I assure you it's moving, Desan said, and shut the transmitter down. He drew a great breath, shut his eyes, and saw the shuttle lift, a silver wedge spreading wings for home, deadly if attacked. They will not attack it. They must not attack it. They will query us when they know the shuttle is launched, and we will discover yet that this is all a ridiculous error of misunderstanding. And looking at nowhere, relays have gone. Nothing stops it, and its defenses are considerable. The Lord's Navigator have not been fools, citizens. We probe worlds with our shuttles, and we plan to get them back. He turned and faced Gothan and the other staff. The message is out, and because I'm a prudent man, are there suits enough for your staff? I advise we get to them, in the case of an accident. The alarm, said Gothan at once. Neoth, sound the alarm. And as a senior staffer moved, The dome pressure alert, Gothan said. That will confound the robots. All personnel to pressure suits. All robots to seek damage. I agree about the suits. Get them. The alarm went, a staccato shriek from overhead. Desan glanced instinctively at an uncommunicative white ceiling. Darkness. Darkness above, where the shuttle reached the thin blue edge of space. The station now knew that things had gone greatly amiss. It should inquire. There should be an inquiry immediate to the planet. Staffers had unlocked a second closet. They pulled out suits, not the expected one or two for emergency exit from this pressure-sealable room, but a tightly jammed lot of them. The lab seemed a mine of defenses, a stealthily equipped stronghold that smelled of conspiracy all over the base, throughout the staff. Everyone in on it. He blinked at the offering of a suit, ears assailed by the siren. He looked into the eyes of Botogi, who had handed it to him. There would be no call, no inquiry from the Lord's Magistrate. He began to know that, in the earnest, clear-eyed way these people behaved, not as lunatics, not schemers. Truth. They had told their truth as they believed it, as the whole base believed it, and the Lord's Magistrate named it heresy. His heart beat steadily again. Things made sense again. His hands found familiar motions, putting on the suit, making the closures. "There's that AI in the controller's office," said a senior staffer. "I have a key." "What will they do?" a younger staffer asked, panic-edged. "Will the station's weapons reach here?" "It's quite distant for sudden actions," said Desan. "Too far, for beams and missiles are slow." His heartbeat steadied further. The suit was about him. Familiar feeling. Hostile worlds and weapons. More familiar ground. He smiled, not a pleasant kind of smile, a parting of lips on strong, long teeth. "And one more thing, young citizen. The ships they have are transports, miners. Mine are hunters. I regret to say we've carried weapons for the last 200,000 years, and my crews know their business. If the Lord's Magistrate attack that shuttle, it will be their mistake. Help Dr. Gothan." "I've got it. Quite, young lord." Gothan made the collar closure. "I've been handling these things longer than—" Explosion thumped somewhere away. Gothan looked up. All motion stopped, and the air rush died in the ducts. "The oxygen system," Botogi exclaimed. "Oh, damn them!" "We have," Desan said coldly. He made no haste. Each final fitting of the suit he made with care. Suit drill, example to the young. The Lord Navigator, youngsters, demonstrates his skill. Pay attention. "And we've just had our answer from the Lord's Magistrate. We need to get to that AI and shut it down. Let's have no panic here. Assume that my shuttle has cleared the atmosphere well above the gray clouds. The horror of the surface. Silver needle aimed at the heart of the Lord's Magistrate. "Alert! Alert!" it would shriek. "Alert! Alert! Alert!" with its transmission relying on no satellites, with its message shoved out in one high-powered bow wave. "Crew on the world is in danger," and code that no Lord Navigator had ever hoped to transmit, a series of numbers in syntaxical link. "Treachery! The Lord's Magistrate are traitors! Aid and rescue! Alert! Alert! Alert!" Anguished scream from a world of dust, a place of skulls, the grave of the search. "Treachery! Alert! Alert! Alert!" Desan was not a violent man. He had never thought of himself as violent. He was a searcher, a man with a quest. He knew nothing of certainty. He believed a woman 250,000 years old because Gothon was Gothon. He cried traitor and let loose havoc, all the while knowing that here might be the traitor, this gentle-eyed woman, this collector of skulls. "Oh, Gothon," he would ask if he dared, "which of you is false? To force the Lord's magistrate to strike with violence enough to damn them, is that what you wish? Against 250,000 years of unabated life? What are my 5 incarnations? Mere genetic congruency? Without memory, I am helpless to know your perspectives. Have you planned this 1,000 years? 10,000? Do you stand in this place and think in the mind of creatures dead longer even than you have lived? Do you hold their skulls and think their thoughts? Was it purpose 8 million years ago? Was it? Is it? Horror upon horror. A mistake on both sides? "Lord Desan," said Bathogi, laying a hand on his shoulder. "Lord Desan, we have a master key. We have weapons. We're waiting, Lord Desan." Above them, the Holocaust. It was only a service robot. It had never known its termination. Not like the base AI in the director's office, which had fought them with locked doors and release of atmosphere to the misfortune of the director. "Tragedy, tragedy," said Bathogi, standing by the small dented corpse there on the ochre sand before the buildings. Smoke rolled up from a sabotaged life support plant to the right of the domes. The world's air had rolled outward and inward and mingled with the breaching of the central dome, the AI transport's initial act of sabotage, ramming the plastic walls. "Microorganisms let loose on this world. The fools, the errant fools." It was not the microorganisms Desan feared. It was the AI 8-wheeled transport, maneuvering itself for another attack on the cold sleep facilities. Prudent to have set themselves inside a locked room with the rest of the scientists and hope for rescue from off-world, but the AI would batter itself against the plastic walls, and living targets kept it distracted from the sleeping, helpless clones. Gothon's juniormost, Bathogi's, those of a dozen senior staffers. And keeping it distracted became more and more difficult. Hour upon hour they had evaded its rushes, clumsy attacks, and retreats in their encumbering suits. They had done damage where they could, while staff struggled to come up with something that might slow it. It lumped along now with a great lot of metal wire wrapped around its rearmost right wheel. "Damn!" cried a young biologist as it maneuvered for her position. It was the agile young who played this game, and one aging Lord Navigator who was the only fighter in the lot. Dodge, dodge, and dodge. "It's going to catch you against the oxy plant, youngster. This way!" Desan's heart thudded as the young woman thumped along in the cumbersome suit in a losing race with the transport. "Oh, damn, it's got it figured. Bathogi!" Desan grasped his probe spear and jogged on. "Divert it!" he yelled. Diverting it was all they could hope for. It turned their way, a whine of the motor, a serpentine flex of its metal body, and a flurry of sand from its 8-wheeled drive. "Run, Lord!" Bathogi gasped beside him, and it was still turning. It aimed for them now, and at another tangent, a white-suited figure hurled a rock to distract it yet again. It kept coming at them. AI. An 8-wheeled, flex-bodied intelligence that had suddenly decided its behavior was not working and altered the program, refusing distraction. A pressure-windowed juggernaut, tracking every turn they made. Closer and closer. Sensors! Desan cried, turning on the slick dust. His footing failed him, and he caught himself, gripped the probe, and aimed it straight at the sensor array clustered beneath the front window. Thump! The dusty sky went blue, and he was on his back, skidding in the sand with the great balloon tires churning sand on either side of him. The suit, he thought with a spaceman's horror of the abrading, while it dawned on him at the same time that he was being dragged beneath the AI, and that every joint and nerve center was throbbing with the high-voltage shock of the probe. Things became very peaceful then, a cessation of commotion. He lay dazed, staring up at a rusty blue sky and seeing it laced with a silver thread. They're coming, he thought, and thought of his eldest clone, sleeping at a well-educated 20 years of age. Handsome lad. He talked to the boy from time to time. Poor lad. The lordship is yours. Your predecessor was a fool. A shadow passed above his face. It was another suited face peering down into his. A weight rested on his chest. Get off, he said. He's alive, Bathogi's voice cried. Dr. Gothan, he's still alive. The world showed no more scars than it had at the beginning. Red and ochre where clouds failed. The algae continued its struggle in sea and tidal pools and lakes and rivers, with whatever microscopic addenda the breached dome had let loose in the world. The insects and the worms continued their blind ascent to space, dominant life on this poor, cratered globe. The research station was in function again, repairs complete. Desan gazed on the world from his ship. It hung as a sphere in the hollow tank by his command station. A wave of his hand might show him the darkness of space, the floodlit shapes of 10 hunting ships, lately returned from the deep and about to seek it again in continuation of the mission, sleek fish rising and sinking again in a figurative black sea. A good many suns had shone on their hulls, but this one had seen them more often than any since their launching. Home. The space station was returning to function. Corpses were consigned to the sun the mission had sought for so long, and power over the mission rested solely, at present, in the hands of the Lord Navigator. In the unprecedented circumstance of the demise of all 5 Lords Magistrate simultaneously, their clones were not yet activated to begin their years of majority. Later will be time to wake the new Lords Magistrate, Desan decreed, at some further world of the search. Let them hear this event as history, when I can manage them personally, he thought. He looked aside at 20-year-old Desan 6, and the youth looked gravely back with the face Desan had seen in the mirror 32 waking years ago. Lord Navigator? You'll wake your brother after we're away. 6, directly after. I'll be staying awake much of this trip. Awake, sir? Quite. There are things I want you to think about. I'll be talking to you and Seven both. About the Lord's Magistrate, sir? Desan lifted brows at this presumption. You and I are already quite well attuned, 6. You'll succeed, young. Are you sorry you missed this time? No, Lord Navigator, I assure you not. Good brain. I ought to know. Go to your post, 6. Be grateful you don't have to cope with a new lordship and 5 new Lords Magistrate and a recent schism. Desan leaned back in his chair as the youth crossed the bridge and settled at a crew post beside the captain. The Lord Navigator was more than a figurehead to rule the 70 ships of the mission with their captains and their crews. Let the boy try his skill on this plotting. Desan intended to check it. He leaned aside with a wince, the electric shock that had blown him flat between the AI's tires had saved him from worse than a broken arm and leg, and the medical staff had seen to that. The arm and the leg were all but healed, with only a light wrap to protect them. The ribs were tightly wrapped too, and they caused him more pain than all the rest. A scan had indeed located 3 errant asteroids, 3 courses the station's computers had not accurately recorded as inbound for the planet until personnel from the ships began to run their own observations. Those were redirected. Casualties, destruction, fighting within the mission. The guilt of the Lord's Magistrate was profound and beyond dispute. "Lord Navigator," the communications officer said, "Dr. Gothan returning your call." "Goodbye," he had told Gothan. "I don't accept your judgment, but I shall devote my energy to the pursuit of mine, and let any who want to join you reside on the station. There are some volunteers. I don't profess to understand them, but you may trust them. You may trust the Lord's Magistrate to have learned a lesson. I will teach it. No member of this mission will be restrained in any opinion while my influence lasts, and I shall see to that. Sleep again, and we may see each other once more in our lives." "I'll receive it," Desan said, pleased and anxious at once that Gothan deigned reply. He activated the Korn control. Ship electronics touched his ear, implanted for comfort. He heard the usual blip and chatter of Korn's mechanical protocols, then Gothan's quiet voice. "Lord Navigator." "I'm hearing you, Doctor." "Thank you for your sentiment. I wish you well, too. I wish you very well." The tablet was mounted before him, above the console. Millions of years ago, a tiny probe had set out from this world, bearing the original. 2 aliens standing naked, one with hand uplifted. A series of diagrams which, partially obliterated, had still served to guide the mission across the centuries. A probe bearing a greeting. Ages-dead cameras and simple instruments. "Greetings, stranger. We come from this place, this star system. See, the hand, the appendage of a builder. This we will have in common. The diagrams. We speak knowledge. We have no fear of you, strangers who read this, whoever you be." Wise fools. There had been a time long ago when fools had set out to seek them in a vast desert of stars. Fools who had desperately needed proof once upon a 250,000 years ago that they were not alone. One dust-scoured alien artifact they found so long ago on a lonely, drifting course. "Hello," it said. The makers, the peaceful ancients, became a legend. They became purpose, inspiration. The overriding, obsessive why that saved a species, pulled it back from war, gave it the stars. "I'm very serious. I do hope you rest, Doctor. Save a few years for the unborn." "My eldest's awake. I've lost my illusions of immortality, Lord Navigator. I hope to spend my years teaching her. I've told her about you, Lord Navigator. She hopes to meet you." "You might still abandon this world and come with us, Doctor." "To search for a myth?" "Not a myth. We're bound to disagree. Doctor, what good can your presence there do? What if you're right? It's a dead end. What if I'm wrong? I'll never stop looking. I'll never know." "But we know they're descendants, Lord Navigator." We are. We're spreading their legend from star to star. They've become a fable. The ancients, the pathfinders, 100 civilizations have taken up that myth. 100 civilizations have lived out their years in that belief and begotten others to tell their story. What if you should find them? Would you know them, or where evolution had taken them? Perhaps we've already met them somewhere among the worlds we visited, and we failed to know them. It was irony, gentle humor. Perhaps, then, Dasan said in turn, we'll find the track leads home again. Perhaps we are their children, 8.25 million years removed. Oh, ye makers of myths, do your work, spacefarer. Tangle the skein with legends. Teach fables to the races you meet. Brighten the universe with them. I put my faith in you. Don't you know this world is all I came to find? But you, child of the voyage, you have to have more. For you, the voyage is the mission. Goodbye to you. Farewell. Nothing is complete calamity. The equation here is different by a multitude of microorganisms let free. Botogi has stopped grieving and begun to have quite different thoughts on the matter. His algae pools may turn out a different breed this time, the shift of a protein here and there in the genetic chain. Who knows what it will breed? Different software this time, perhaps. Good voyage to you, Lord Navigator. Look for your ancients under other suns. We're waiting for their offspring here, under this one.